Good morning, guys. Welcome to day 112 until I'm a YouTube millionaire. Albert Einstein once said that compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world, which I think is apropos about which to speak, especially considering the new discoveries underneath the Egyptian pyramids, which are one of the seven wonders of the world, the pyramids of Giza being. Recently, they just discovered some really deep chasms with granite chambers 9 feet tall, deep within the crust of the earth, going way deep down, 2 kilometers, apparently. But that's beside the point. Albert Einstein once said that compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. The reason I bring this up is because this was the basic idea behind the Social Security system once it was first created a long time ago. I think it was back in like 1903 or something. I can't remember the exact date it was created. But the idea was something similar to what Benjamin Franklin did when he put a certain amount of money aside for a trust for the city of Philadelphia to be dispersed after, I believe it was 200 years. So it was dispersed like in the 90s, somewhere around there. 1990s. So he put, I don't remember the exact amount of money he put in that account, but when it was dispersed, it was about $8 million. And that went directly to the Philadelphia government. And that was Benjamin Franklin's intent. That's what he wanted to happen. The idea behind the Social Security system was that the government would take a portion of your money and invest it in funds, index funds, the stock market essentially, and grow it so that once you got to your retirement age, then you would have a fund to pay for your retirement. That was the idea. Basically, the government was taking the responsibility that you should take upon your own shoulders and taking a portion of your money every month and putting it into the stock market, as well as a variety of other things. Well, if you had actually taken that money and put it into the stock market yourself, the same proportional amount, then rather than being maxed out at about $4,000 per month that Social Security can pay you, that's right around where the maximum is. If you put the same amount requisite into the stock market yourself, at about the age of 65, you'd be getting $32,000 per month. So they've been very reckless, irresponsible with that money. And part of the reason for that is because they keep on taking it and putting it into other things. So they're basically going about this all the wrong way. It is my perspective that the entirety of the government could be funded by taking 10%, not of our money by force, 10% of people's money who voluntarily choose to do it, putting it into the stock market and fund all of the government's responsibilities or things that you want the government to do with that money. What's screwed this up is the central banking system. It's made it make no sense. It makes us put resources into leveraged accounts that can go belly up at any moment. It's not sensical. But if we were to do something like Benjamin Franklin, way back in the 1790s, and put aside a fund and let it grow over the course of 100 years or whatever. I actually did some calculations here on MATLAB. MATLAB is a mathematical calculation laboratory. It's a very powerful program that I've used on many of my scientific papers. I used it all through college. But let's say you put $1 million into an account, something similar to what Benjamin Franklin did back 300 years ago, and giving yourself a conservative growth rate of 5% for that account. After 300 years, it'd be worth $2.3 trillion. That could fund all the government things that you want it to fund. All those things that are actually important, that aren't like the departments that don't need to be there. Rather than have 800 military bases that have been forced upon us and the rest of the world, only possible through the central banking system, which gives us crazy and irresponsible leverage, we'd have 80 army bases around the world. See, one of the reasons that the central banking system had any way of gaining a foothold in our world is out of fear. Because if any one government has a system like that, then it puts all of the other governments at a disadvantage. That means you have a central banking system which can use leverage or fake money, print it out of thin air, steal wealth from people in order to fund their wars and their liabilities and all that stuff. And let's say they can leverage at 10x. So, and their government has a GDP of $1 trillion. Well, now it can produce the equivalent of $10 trillion by cheating, by stealing, by lying, cheating, and stealing. And if they're going up against a government that doesn't have a central bank but has a real GDP of $5 trillion, they're going to beat them if they start a war. This is the fear aspect that has allowed central banks to keep their foothold in the world. It's disgusting, and it is pure evil. If it were gone away with entirely, the tapeworm that is the central banks, then we could fund our governments in this way. In this way, you have a government fund that is invested in the capitalist system of your country, voluntarily, entirely, and all government institutions and responsibilities that you want your government to have, they'll be able to fund that themselves through the interest on the money that they have invested in companies, rather than force it out of our hands through the income tax. Does that make sense? I hope it does. Because this whole system is fucking upside down. And it's the central banks that have done this. And these bastards behind the scenes that have forced this upon us, we made the United States specifically to escape the central banks. And they seeped in and tried to unalive multiple United States presidents and succeeded on multiple occasions until eventually they got that central bank put back in place. It's disgusting. I would go so far as to say, if aliens exist, this is an alien system to keep us all enslaved. I would say more appropriately, more accurately, that it's demonic. It's a demon system. It's disgusting. So, if the government would just be funded by proper investment in companies, then that would work better by 1,000,000,000 times. Let's say to get a good seed funding started, you do basically like a tithe system where there's a flat tax, no loopholes, no deductions or anything, a flat tax of 10% across the board for everybody that makes X, Y, Z income. 10% flat tax across the board, starting as seed funding. You can actually stay there at 10%. That's reasonable. It's what we paid in the feudalistic times. It's still like 5 times what we paid during the Roman Empire. But 10% is not crazy. It's a tithe. It's what we pay to churches as faithful Christians, right? So 10% goes to this seed funding for the government, and they put that money into the stock market, into funds. Not like what they do with Social Security, because that's all based on fiat currency and central banking nonsense. And then they take that interest that they make off of that, say half of the interest that they make per year to fund their government responsibilities. Hiring people, building government buildings, very simple stuff like taking care of roads, very simple education system. Everybody else takes care of the other stuff. Maybe I'm naive, but I can tell you that the core of our problems right now, and have been for hundreds of years, is the central banks. They need to be destroyed, never be allowed to come back. Cauterize the wound. Never let them come back. That's all I got for today. Love y'all. Peace.